Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So this past weekend was the Miami Grand Prix. And a lot happened. I feel like it was a very busy weekend. I don't know if it felt busy because we were personally busy, but I think the whole weekend as a whole was a little crazy for everyone.
Yeah, first and foremost, I will say last episode I was a little judgmental on the Miami GP just from the celebrity
we were
standpoint.
judgy because everybody else was telling us how horrible it was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if last year or I don't know. It was fantastic this year.
I loved watching it. It was so much fun.
It was a ton of fun. I feel like it was the liveliest we've seen the grid in terms of action battles. I cannot remember a race that, my heart was literally racing the whole time.
Yeah.
So overall, I loved it.
I thought it was a great weekend.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be Coda all the way. I love them equally at this point right now. So,
Vegas, you still got to show up.
Vegas, I would feel so differently if the timing was different.
Yeah.
And that's the hill I'm going to die on.
I think that's the hill all of us are going to die on.
Yeah. But there is so much to talk about, too, just in the fact of,
our layout of this episode is not going to be our normal, race recap episode because there is so much, news and comments made throughout the weekend.
There is news, rule changes, comments, liveries, personnel changes.
Yeah.
First-time Grand Prix winners. It was...
Yeah.
It was a lot. I'm tired.
Yeah, so instead of doing our normal Grand Prix recap episode format, we're going to do probably just we're going to talk real quickly about some of the stuff that's been going on before the actual race weekend happened. And then we'll probably just do a quick little section on the smaller things. And then we're going to get into the race because the race was a little crazy. There was some heartbreak this weekend. There was some tears of happiness shed. There's emotions all over the place.
Yeah, it was a very, very busy weekend.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
Ferrari Blue is what I want to start this section on because just some history. The whole reason why they brought back the Ferrari Blue was because in 1964, Ferrari had an issue with the FIA. So they asked the ACI, which was the Italian Automobile Society, to back them. And they were like, no. And so Enzo Ferrari was like, we will never, ever wear Italy red again. And so they went to Watkins Glen and debuted a full blue car.
Yeah, it was a blue and white car.
It was a blue and white car. That was what the people wanted. Ferrari.
And it was like a navy blue. It was like a navy blue and white car. And so Ferrari teased on their social media that they were going to have a blue car. That it was going to be because of their new sponsor with HP, and it was going to be a whole thing. And their race suits and all of the clothing for the weekend.
Listen, they got that right.
Were like a light, almost like a Smurf blue.
It was like a powder blue.
That's a nicer way to go about it.
But they got that right. They got the race suits. I feel like the shirts.
Yeah, and then they proved to us that all men are liars.
Oh no, I want to go about it a different way. I'm convinced that this is just continuing my argument that most men are colorblind.
I think it's a mixture of most men are colorblind and all men are liars.
Anyways, the car was red with blue detailing.
It had a nice little blue stripe on the sides. They just slapped some HP logos everywhere.
Also, guys, a blue HP logo does not make your car blue.
Yeah, that's just a logo.
That's just a logo.
If you're going to say you're going to do a blue car, do a blue car. It didn't help that, 2 days later, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls were like, we can do a blue car. We can do a crazy colorful car.
Their car
was amazing.
Was beautiful.
It was perfect. It was so Miami.
They basically, I would suggest to everyone listening, go watch it on social media because it was a very creative livery reveal.
Yeah.
Essentially, I believe it was a local artist, but I'm not 100% sure. But they had the car basically graffitied on paint that was water soluble. They went through a car wash and then basically...
Almost like a tie-dye version of a car.
Yeah, and it was, I think they were calling it Chameleon, was what I saw online.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful.
It was
and
really
it was
good.
So bright and vibrant, and what I feel like was, like, the perfect car, one, going into the summer, but also, like, Miami. You think neon, you think just, like, those summer... Colorful colors. And so, 10 out of 10, V-Carb, you did it.
Yeah.
And honestly, keep the crazy liveries coming because...
Well, because sometimes, like, Red Bull especially has a hard time. Even, like, the helmets that they can do for Red Bull athletes, like, the Red Bull logos have to be so gigantic that it takes
so
over.
Red Bull.
Like, you can't have such a distinct helmet sometimes because it's just Red Bull. So when they said they were going to do a special livery, I was a little nervous that it was just going to be, like, Red Bull. But they did a really good job with it, and I think other teams need to take notes.
Well, and I think one thing to say, too, kind of a full circle moment, is people were kind of annoyed at the amount of carbon fiber at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
And people, yes, I understand that all of this is a crazy sentence to say, all of this does weigh down the car, color, paint, I get that.
Well, people have gotten to the point where they think it should be a rule that you can't just have, like, raw carbon fiber on your car. Like, it has to have a color of some sort.
I genuinely want to know, like, how much time, how much second of a second are you shaving off by not having any color? But also... I don't know, have fun with it. Like, the drivers love their crazy helmets.
IndyCar literally had a car, like, a week or two ago where the sponsor, I think, was, like, Mission Taco. And the car looked like a freaking taco. Yeah. I'm sorry. F1 needs to step it up.
I feel like people loved V-Carb's livery, so keep them coming. But that's kind of the livery. No one else really had anything of note.
I don't think anybody else changed anything.
Yeah. So.
A lot of people had, like, fun helmets for this. Mm-hmm. Like, Oscar had a really good helmet. I know Danny had a good helmet. There's a few of the drivers that had, like, a special...
6 or 8 drivers.
Both Ferrari drivers had a blue helmet, which they were super excited about their blue helmets.
They were just
blue helmets. I think those were the main people who had, like, fun stuff.
Yeah. But that's it on the livery front. So... I guess the next news to talk about is there was a rule change. This is just a really quick tidbit. But the jumpstart rules changed starting this weekend. This was due to, I think, what happened earlier, Lando. And so it is no longer, like, I think it used to be, like, if you crossed the line, it was considered a false start. Now it is any visible movement after light 4, which Will Buxton explained is actually the second light because
it's the fourth light down. That lights up, that lights down. It turns the light off.
Like they said on F1 TV, it should just be once the lights are, like, once it's started, you should not be allowed to move.
Yeah.
That's it. But anyways, that changed. And then some personnel changes.
This was so messed up.
So I want to start on the, like, kind of sad news, and then we'll end it on the, like, exciting news. The new pundit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so for some reason, it's not really known why. I just think there's a lot of changes happening. Sauber got rid of a few engineers.
One of them
and personnel, including Valtteri's race engineer. And for those that, like, aren't super aware of the involvement of the race engineer, like, that is the person that's speaking to them the whole race.
Yeah.
For us as rowers, like, that's the coxswain. Like, and
it genuinely makes a huge difference, like, when who's talking to you, who's giving the commands, who's telling you what's going on. Like, if it's somebody who you've never really, like, worked with before, or when it definitely makes a huge difference.
Well, and I think this is the perfect example of, like, when we talked about Ayo Komatsu, we saw how long he was a race engineer with Romain Grosjean. Like, a lot of these guys have very close relationships.
I mean,
look at Max and GP.
Yeah, Lewis and Bono. People were like, is he going to go to Ferrari with him?
So, apparently, the rumor, or I don't know if if it was just, like, a fact at this point, Valtteri was not even told until, like, a few days prior. So the decision had already been made. And later on, we'll talk about it, but this decision will kind of impact several issues. Other personnel changes that I thought I'm actually really, really excited about. It. F1 TV, Ruth Buscum is now a new pundit. I'm not sure what F1 Grand Prix she'll be at, but for those that don't know, she is a former strategist. She started at Ferrari, I think, in 2012, and she was most recently at Alfa Romeo. I believe she was with them up until last season. And now she's a pundit, and honestly,
it's been so great having her.
The insight that she brought, because, I mean, I really enjoy all the pundits on F1 TV. I really do. But I think having, like, the driver perspective is one thing from the, like, friends of, like, F1.
Like Jack Doohan.
But I also just think getting that race strategy, it's kind of like when they bring on, like, the older strategist when they do the European leg. But, yeah, she was so insightful and really brought, really interesting points.
Yeah, and there were some... I'm salty about this. Not about her, but there were some annoying people online making comments about her being on F1 TV, and it was just like...
Oh my god, get over it.
You are some troll sitting behind a screen. She literally graduated from, like, Cambridge or Oxford
Dude, she's
with
only
honors.
34.
Like, she is so smart.
The things she's achieved, like, amazing.
Like, sit down and be quiet. Do not comment on anything. She's doing a great job.
Come back to us when you have her resume.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk.
Well, and that we did not write this down as something that we were going to discuss. But we actually did not get a chance to watch F1 Academy this weekend because, again, we had some personal things that we were dealing with. So we didn't have a chance to watch F1 Academy, but we have heard some of the comments that the F1 Academy commentators were making, and it just sounds horrible.
Yeah. I don't know enough about it.
I don't know if it was the F1... I don't think it was the F1 TV commentators. I think the F1 TV commentators were, like, Alex Brundle, because he usually is one. I think it was the on-track commentators. Because the on-track commentators were apparently saying stuff like, oh, I don't even know when the last woman in F1 was. Like, what? And then they were commenting on some of the drivers' appearances, which was super weird.
I unfortunately don't know enough about this.
Yeah.
I have to look more into it. You saw it, I didn't.
It was just overall very strange.
Yeah, I definitely, the one things that I saw was, just kind of the lack of crowd to come to the event. Like, it definitely seemed like the grandstands were a little bit on the emptier side. But I also think that this is only the second season, and
this is only the second race.
It's the second race. People are still, like, getting into F1 Academy.
I also do think when it is a sprint weekend for F1, it makes it difficult for fans to watch F1 Academy because
it's a lot.
It's a lot. You have to basically take your whole weekend to watch it then. And even if it's like, if the sports series is F2 that weekend, it makes it difficult for people to watch F2 stuff because, like, when it's a sprint weekend, all day Saturday we're watching stuff, and then all day, well, even like in the afternoon on Friday we're watching stuff, all day Saturday we're watching stuff, and then Sunday for the first half of the day we're watching stuff, and it just makes it really difficult. And then if you're in person, like, you might not want to get to the track. It's like a music festival. Like, you got to pace yourself.
Yeah. I will say the social media aspect, because I follow F1 Academy and all that, it did look like there was a ton of support from not only, like, Tommy Hilfiger, who is supporting one of the girls.
And
Charlotte Tilbury was there. There were a few, like, really prominent female celebrities, as well as a lot of prominent female figures in Formula One, whether, you know, you're a significant other or a pundit or whatever, was invited. And I think that's also really important, is that they're creating a space that I don't know if it's ever really been there for women before. And so I think it's growing. I think it's going to take a little bit. Some time. But yeah, unfortunately, we could not follow it the way we wanted to this weekend.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of a bummer, but...
That's everything that I have for the news.
Yeah, that's it for tidbits, and that took us 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, our next segment's going to be a mixture of free practice and sprint qualifying and likely the sprint race.
Yeah.
So, let's get into that. All right, so free practice 1, about 7 minutes, well, there was only one free practice, but about 7 minutes into it, Charles decided to take a little spin around and just spin all the way around and end up backwards on the track in a kind of like a blind turn almost. It was definitely not the ideal space to be backwards. Because he was also, like, across the track.
They got the yellow flags up fast, though.
Yeah,
I'll give them that. They got the yellow flags up fast, but it was just...
It was a mess for him, and also probably disappointing for him because he didn't really get that much practice time because he was trying to turn around, and we're watching the track map and seeing, like, the little dots getting closer to him, and we start to realize that, like, the entire grid is about to be backed up behind him, and his future teammate, Lewis Hamilton, was the one who reached him first, and Lewis just kind of sat there like, where do I go? And eventually Charles was able to turn a little bit and give him space, so then everyone just went past him as he's just awkwardly sitting there on the track. But apparently Charles's clutch overheated, so he actually could not turn. And then that caused him to actually not be able to finish the rest of practice, which kind of sucks for him, but, I mean, he still did well this weekend, so.
Yeah, plus, you know, at the end of the day, he didn't crash. There wasn't, like, extreme damage. I think that would have been probably worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I just feel like if that was me, my social anxiety, I mean, I think about myself backing up in parking lots and if someone's waiting for me, but then you have the whole grid and you're trying to attempt a 3-point turn in an F1. It was a mess. But that was really it.
The one other thing for practice was the McLarens had brought a ton of upgrades, and by a ton, I mean it was like 6 or 7. It was a whole list of upgrades. And both of them were struggling during practice with, I guess it was like a steering issue or more of like a setup problem where it was just harder to turn one way or another.
Online, it specifically said it was an asymmetric power steering assistance issue.
Sorry, I don't use the specific words.
No. I think Lando was struggling with both sides of the power steering, and I think Oscar was only having one side, but also, again, these cars are rebuilt, like, every race. So practice is when they're doing, like, a lot of just, like, fine-tuning.
Yeah.
So, pretty typical.
Yeah. And then we have sprint qualifying, which was also on Friday. So in SQ1, this is where we kind of see Bottas start to struggle a bit with his new race engineer.
Yeah, I think it just kind of, like, shows you, one, that there's, like, clearly something going on at Sauber.
Yeah, something's happening.
So, yeah, it's really weird. I mean, they were saying they don't know if it's Audi's involvement or what, but it definitely didn't seem great because Bottas ended up impeding Oscar Piastri because his, like, engineer just told him too late.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, you have to be so in sync with your race engineer that they need to know, like, when do I tell the driver that, like, another car is coming up behind them?
Yeah, I'm also just, like, I mean, I guess this would be a question, like, we would ask a driver if we ever interviewed, kind of, like, one, how are you paired with a race engineer? And 2, like, do you guys just have to click? Like, is it just, like, whoever?
I think they have to.
Or, like, are you, like, You know, like, do you have some sort of relationship prior? Like, how do you build on that so quickly?
I don't know.
But, yeah, definitely intrigued to see, one, if there's going to be an improvement, and two, if there's any more kind of commentary from Valtteri regarding this change.
Yeah. But, yeah, he ended up getting a 3-place grid penalty for the sprint because of this impediment. And that was the main thing that happened in SQ1.
Mm-hmm.
Then SQ2, it was just a Mercedes issue. Like, they just could not move on.
Yeah, they could not find the pace.
Yeah, it was very strange.
I just, again, I think it's just Mercedes can't figure out their car.
And then we get into SQ3, and the big shocker was Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah.
It was like the Honey Badger was back finally. He ended up getting 4th, and nobody went out until about 4 minutes left, and so that gave people enough time to kind of do like a warm up, like an out lap, and then actually do a lap. So I think everybody only got one actual fast lap in. So it was really great to see Danny do super well. And this is the first time this season that he had outperformed his teammate, I think.
Yeah.
This was actually also the first time this season that Logan had outqualified Alex Albon.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then the actual sprint race.
Yeah, so like Emma said, Bottas ended up getting that 3-place grid penalty, and so that put him in dead last. So he ended up right at the back. And then one thing to note was that Alex Albon started from the pit lane due to a suspension change under parc fermé conditions. So that was just kind of the two changes that I didn't even notice Alex.
Oh, I did.
In the pit lane. I don't know.
Because they did a whole like shot of him where he was in his garage and everybody was doing the formation lap.
Oh, maybe I missed that.
Maybe. I don't know.
But you want to take over?
Yeah, so the start happened, and I feel like usually the first turn after the start is where we see the most drama, and that's kind of where we did see the most drama here.
Of course.
It was basically they're calling it a 4-car pileup. I think it was just a racing incident. People trying to get around the turn where they don't have enough room. And it was all between Hamilton, Alonso, Stroll, and Lando. And it actually ended up with Lando and Lance out of the race. Mm-hmm. Lando actually ended up on the other side of the track, and
he sprinted across the track like Bigfoot.
Yeah, which then caused him to have a $50,000 fine, which is insane, and probably points on his stupid license.
If you jaywalked in college and they slapped you with a $50,000, I think I would.
I mean, it's not shocking because how much did they charge?
I mean, it's FIA.
Hamilton last year.
True.
But I almost think if this happens more than once a season, maybe FIA, you should find a way to get the drivers a little bit faster from the other side of the grid. But I don't think they want to do that because they wouldn't get the fine money then. And that money goes God knows where.
I just want to know where the money goes.
I know everyone wants to know where the money goes. And I'd say the main other things that were going on in the race was the K-Mag and Lewis stuff.
Yeah, so Kevin Magnussen has been
more than a menace.
Feral the last few races in a way that I don't know if it's just like old Kevin Magnussen.
At
For
first
those
it was
that don't know,
really funny.
He was like this when he was younger. And then he became like a dad and came back on Haas and seemed to mellow out. And now I don't know what the hell is going on, but
it's definitely an interesting choice on his part.
I mean, he's definitely being a team player. Like, holy crap,
he's only ever doing it when Hülkenberg has a chance to get points. So I almost feel like he's like, I need to be a team player. I need to ensure that my teammate gets points so that we can do better in the Constructors' Championship. Which, like, power to you, makes sense. I get it. But you have so many penalty points now that you might be banned from a race, bro. Like
calm down.
Like, and those penalty points stay on your license, your super license, for an entire 12 months. So right now you have 8 penalty points. I don't know if you had
I like
any
how
before.
you're talking to him directly.
I know.
Like,
I know.
Kevin, if you're listening.
I don't know if you've had these points since the beginning of the season or some from last year, but like, you might not get signed again if you have all of these penalty points on your super license, because then if you get another penalty, you're banned again.
I just want to know if it's like, again, if it's a personal decision or if this is like a strategic. Like, I cannot imagine.
I think next race
strategy.
we need to listen to his onboard and have it up, because we will actually hear what his race engineer is saying to him.
True.
Because I want to know if his race engineer is being like, be a menace, go crazy.
Well, anyways, let's talk about what he did in the sprint. So, Kevin Magnussen and Lewis get spicy, with Kevin getting a 10-second penalty for leaving the track around the turn 14-15 chicane. A little bit later on, they continued to battle it out when Lewis attempted to pass. K-Mag ran wide, re-entered the track at the apex of turn 12, and then played bumper cars with his and Lewis's wheels. And then lap 14, they get into it again, and Yuki Tsunoda enters the chat. Yuki finally passes Kevin Magnussen, and then Hamilton moves past. K-Mag gets slapped with more penalties for the clash and track limits. And Hamilton did technically finish 8th within the sprint, but got a 20-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane when the field passed through it under the safety car. So, penalties all around, but Kevin Magnussen was making it rain to a degree that, like, I don't know what the other drivers' perspectives are. I think Lewis was kind of laughing about it.
Well, yeah, afterwards they had, like, in the post-sprint interviews, he was like, yeah, some of it was uncalled for. And, like, not the penalties, but, like, his actions. And Hamilton started laughing in the post-race interview, hearing that he had said that, because it was like, yeah, of course, some of it was uncalled for. I do want to know if he's passing the overall penalty, like, seconds added on, that I'm pretty sure Esteban Ocon had set that record last year with, like, 30-plus seconds added on.
Well, didn't at one point, I don't know if it was in the sprint or the actual race, Kevin Magnussen got a 10-second penalty and then got another penalty because they didn't perform the 10-second penalty properly?
Yeah.
Like,
I think it was a 5-second penalty, and then they didn't perform it properly, so then he got a 10-second penalty. But if they don't perform it properly, typically that's on the pit crew and not him, because they just are not supposed to touch the car for however long that is.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. If it is a Haas issue, a K-Mag
I think
issue,
it's a mixture of a lot of it. I think it's yeah.
It's gonna be.
It's an interesting one, to say the least.
Yeah, Imola's gonna be.
Oh yeah.
He like.
Well, because Haas is based in Italy too, so Haas is
it's like their home
it's one of their home races basically.
Yeah.
So, I think the only other thing that I wanted to talk about for the sprint was that, well, there were two things. Again, because Danny qualified 4th, he was actually able to hold on to that, and he was defending from Carlos and, who was it, Oscar, for quite a long time, and ended up getting 4th in the race. I did question Carlos and Oscar's performance during the sprint race, just because, not to put a damper on Danny's successful race, but it sometimes looked like they were just not trying to pass him or really going crazy for it. And because they do have qualifying like 3 hours afterwards, like I just wonder sometimes the drivers if they care to pass necessarily if they're going to get points anyways, because why take the risk of potentially damaging your car?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I'm sure there's some level of discussion about that.
Yeah.
Just based off of, who knows, supplies or penalties or whatever's going on within the team. But I would hope not. You know, I do think that there were moments where Danny was able to pull away. So, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Just because we're not in the room.
The reason why I mostly say that is because of
The close proximity of Carlos at certain points.
Yeah, and Carlos and Oscar are in a Ferrari and a McLaren, and Danny is in a V-carb.
Yeah.
Those cars can easily, like, on speed, can pass a V-carb.
Yeah.
But it was really great to see Danny do well. I think that it was a race that he needed.
It was a boost of confidence to him, but also to the team.
Yeah.
I think, I think V-carb has surprised a lot of people.
Oh, 100%.
This season. I know we talked earlier, I think in one of the first 2 Grand Prix, about how there is discussion and frustration from other teams because they are kind of like a farm team for Red Bull.
Yeah.
So who knows if that is helping them, but happy that there's some level of positivity in Danny Rick's world.
Well, and then the last thing, finally, is that Logan beat Alex for the first time ever at his home race.
Yeah.
If he was going to do it anywhere, do it there.
Yeah, and honestly, I do want to just mention that Logan did perform pretty well.
Yeah, he got 10th.
He ended up placing 10th in the sprint. Unfortunately, in the sprint, only the top 8 received points. If it was a regular race, he would have received a point. But I do think that that was just, like, a really good performance for him, and, while his outcome in the race kind of sucks, I'm happy that he was able to have a pretty successful sprint at home.
Yeah.
So.
That is everything for free practice and the sprint section. We are going to go into quali and the race.
Cool.
So, for qualifying, the first disappointment, really, of the day was that Danny could not carry on his performance from the sprint into the qualifying for the main race. Not really sure what happened there. I think it might have been a strategy issue. Not really sure, but yeah, that was definitely the first disappointment. So he did not move past Q1. I think he ended up getting like P18, but then his 3-place grid penalty from China ended up applying, so he was P20 on the grid then.
Yeah, it was almost like a similar kind of incident with what Bottas dealt with in the sprint, where they were 18th. They ended up having 3-place grid penalty and end up in dead last. So, bit of a bummer. But, yeah, I mean, what do?
Yeah.
Like.
And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was Aston Martin could not make it out of Q2, really. Don't really know what's going on with Aston. They're having a weird go right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's really going on. It seems like Fernando seems a bit frustrated by his performance, but also the car's performance.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure if they brought upgrades this weekend.
I don't think they did.
But I saw a post-race debrief from Fernando where he was like, I got to work on, like, a few things myself. So, not really sure if they're starting to struggle with the car or if they're having a similar issue to last season where they kind of can't keep up with everyone once upgrades start to come
but
in.
I feel like it's been like this the whole season for them so far, and it's only been 6 races, so.
But I mean, they're at the like top of the middle of the pack. Like they're not doing terribly.
they're not doing terribly, but for 2 of their cars to not make it out of Q2.
Yeah, not great. Not great
definitely
for there.
That's all I wanted to talk about for qualifying. So, time for the race.
Yeah.
So, in the race, Charles did not have a great start at all. It almost like the car just was not moving at first. But then as they get into turn 1, all we see is Checo absolutely nosedive into almost the rear of Max Verstappen. But because of the way that other people had started, Oscar Piastri had a phenomenal start and moved up from 6th to 3rd.
Yeah, it was
a really good start for him.
I do think, too, having watched, 20-something, 30-something Grand Prix at this point, Max has a very typical strategy off of the start where he just kind of bum rushes the person in second and tries to push into them. And I think Oscar kind of just, had luck of the draw with the, like, Checo just, like, running through the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Oscar was literally just, like, in the perfect place at the perfect time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think he definitely lucked out.
And then for the entire basically first lap, we see both Alpines wheel to wheel the whole time, and they were going around turns that, like, the commentators were saying those cars aren't going to be able to make it around that turn wheel to wheel. Well, one of them will have to give up, and then 2 seconds later they'd be like, oh, they found a way to go wheel to wheel around that turn. Guess it's possible. Especially that one turn closer to the end where it's kind of like
the 14, 15.
Yeah, where everyone was almost slamming into the wall. They were still able to do it wheel to wheel.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I mean, they didn't play any of the radio messages. That definitely made it seem like it was, like, a personal issue. Like, kind of just seemed like they were just racing.
Well, and afterwards, Esteban was like, I had so much fun. Like, that's the kind of racing I enjoy. Like, that's fun to me.
Well, and I think that was another thing that we saw a lot of at the end of the race.
People had fun.
People had fun. And I will say, it was so much fun to watch this. Because, yeah, watching the two Alpines going tire to tire, my heart was racing. It was stressful. It was like, oh my God, who's going to win this?
Yeah.
What is the outcome? And then, of course, it runs through your brain. You think of all the times that Mercedes have crashed into each other and Ferrari have crashed into each other. And you're like, oh God, what are we about to witness?
But in the end, Pierre ended up passing Esteban, and then a few laps later, we see Oscar use DRS to pass Charles. And Max was actually only about 2 seconds ahead of Charles. So normally at that point we see Max is pulled away by like 5+ seconds. But it was only 2 seconds ahead. And we kept seeing Oscar put up the fastest lap at this point.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it when we were reading through the race notes that it felt like the fastest lap kept going between Oscar and Lando and Charles at one point, but it really was surprisingly the McLarens with the dominant pace.
Yeah. And then during this, we see a bunch of fighting between Lewis and Hulkenberg. Lewis eventually passes Hulk, but then later on in a turn, Lewis ends up locking up. So then Hulkenberg passes him again. Eventually, Lewis passes him, and all is fine. And then we see the Williams and Sauber cars all pit for hards. I'd say this is probably lap 17 at this point.
Yeah.
And they then by lap 18 we see Checo pit, and he's the first of the lead cars to actually pit. And Lando was trying to pass him as this was going on, and Checo ended up just dipping into the pits. So then Lando was able to get some clean air and try and catch up a bit. And at this point, that's when Lando started getting the fastest lap because he had the clean air. And it was interesting because Lando, Oscar, and Carlos, and I think Max at this point, they weren't pitting yet, but Lando and Oscar, for some reason, on the old tires, they were flying.
They started on the mediums, correct? Yeah. And that was what I think was so surprising, was that they were
able to manage the tires.
I feel like the one issue, or not one issue, but I feel like a common issue that McLaren has brought up is the tire degradation.
Yeah.
Is that they've kind of lost that pace, and we've seen it where they're inching closer, and then all of a sudden you can just see the tires lose life, and they start to back off. Whereas this, it just seemed like they were really effortlessly flying.
Yeah. It didn't seem difficult.
Yeah, it seemed like their tires were not affected by the conditions at all. Because, again, you have to remember, it's Miami, it's Florida, it is hot. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that is hot asphalt, or whatever it is. That's a hot track. So, the tires... They said it was
47 degrees Celsius, which, in Fahrenheit, that's over 100, I'm pretty sure.
I'm not sure, but... Yeah.
Doesn't really matter in the end.
It was hot, is all.
Yeah. Well, and then we see Charles go in for a pit at lap 20, and Ferrari actually had a 1.9 second pit stop, which if you had asked me about a Ferrari pit stop that quickly last year, I would have laughed in your face. So I don't know what they did over the winter, but kudos to you guys.
Yeah.
And then at lap 20, we see Max hit the cone at the chicane. In the post-race interview, he just said that he just didn't like it, so he figured he would remove it for everyone and did everyone a favor. It was actually quite funny to watch him hit it because he also said that he was crash test done on the new front wing.
Honestly, it was funny.
It was funny.
Like,
as he hit it, he was like, "Oh no!" And then it like gets stuck in between his front wing and his front tire, and then it comes out and then is on the actual track. And at first they were like, "No, it's not on the racing line. We don't need to call a yellow flag." And then like not even 30 seconds later, I think it was George who called into the radio. He was like, "The cone is on the racing track. It's on the racing line." And so then they ended up calling a virtual safety car. And that actually ended up causing a bunch of people to pit and change their tires. But the virtual safety car did not last very long because it took about 2 seconds for them to actually get the cone off the track.
Yeah, they moved efficiently.
And so Max, I think, had gone into the pit expecting that he was going to get that virtual safety car advantage for his pit time, but he didn't really get that. So now at this point, it's like lap 20-something, and he's pitted.
Well, and I will say, one thing I saw after the race, and I don't know how true this was, because it was on, as I was scrolling through Instagram, but apparently someone at Red Bull was quoted being like, Max did sustain damage from this, and maybe that was why he didn't win. And it was like, guys, come on. He hit a cone.
I think he would have said that.
Yeah. It was like, how, I mean, granted, these cars are very fragile, so, like, it can probably cause a bit of damage, but it's like, come on. So
Max was the one who hit the cone, so maybe he wouldn't have won because he hit a damn cone. Sorry, I hate when people say that. So then, like I said, Max pit at the end of the virtual safety car, so he didn't really get that advantage. And then at lap 27, we finally see Oscar pit. But moments after we see Oscar pit, a yellow flag and a safety car come out because K-Mag decided to play bumper cars with Logan Sargent.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean,
this was the moment that people were like, K-Mag, this is too much.
The first thing was that there's a lot of discussion of whether Logan Sargent could have seen Kevin Magnussen coming with his side mirrors.
I don't think he did.
I think because of the way the turn was, where they collided, because that's what ultimately happened, I believe enough people that know the sport better than we do kind of said it's kind of your own instinct to understand that
there could be a car
there, but like they're gonna move out of the way for you. I just feel like it sucked because the rumors swirling about Logan, the Miami Grand Prix being his last race, him being replaced,
it being his home race too.
It being his home race, I mean. The kid's from Fort Lauderdale, which is like 20 miles away from Miami. It sucks because it's like he wasn't even allowed to finish the race. Yeah. So now, it's
because
Tuesday.
The rear of the car just went straight into the barriers, and that's where all of the sensitive bits of the car are really.
Granted, as Max said in the post-race, green room, thank God they have a third chassis, but it's still, I think... it's Tuesday now after Miami. I'm curious to see if any comments from Williams are going to be...
I think we would have heard them already.
I feel like we would have known already if Logan wasn't. But I also know that the next Grand Prix is in 2 weeks, so who knows. But it sucked to watch because K-Mag was able to drive away from it. And
he did get a penalty.
Yeah, but Logan was officially retired.
Yeah. So because of where the safety car came out, the safety car actually caught everyone right in front of Max. So Max was the first one behind the safety car. So Lando was actually in front of the safety car, and you have to actually catch up to the safety car. And so he was able to just speed up and go into the pit, get his tires changed. And by the time that he came out, they basically had to have the safety car let everyone pass the safety car, go all the way around the track, catch up to behind him. So then eventually the safety car was in front of him. So he basically was able to make a pit stop without any time being added up. Like his pit stop essentially was not even a pit stop. Like it just essentially did not even happen because of the way that the safety car was.
I think it was that moment where that we all every single person watching this Formula One race knew that Lando was going to do it.
Or this was... I think I was holding my breath because I was like, I don't want to jinx this, but I was like, this is the moment that could be, like, your first race. Like, your first race win, because this is the best chance that you'll ever get at it.
Well, and it was funny because I do think that, yes, we always talk about motorsport being, like, strategy and skill and, like, all this. But
it's a lot of luck.
Yeah, it's literally just a game of chance.
Yeah.
And it really depends on a safety car or a yellow flag or, you know, a freaking crash. Or you never know.
I mean, the safety car is... not to be controversial here, guys, but the safety car is literally the reason why Max Verstappen won the freaking Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 2021 and ended up winning the World Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that, like, I feel like you can't sit here and take the win away from him. Take the win away because it could have happened to anyone. Yeah. You know, it could have happened to Max.
Well, and it sucks to say that Logan's downfall was Lando's rising, basically. Yeah. So by the time we get to lap 32, the safety car went in, and Lando just had to basically defend Max. I was a little nervous that Max was going to pass him in the front.
Well, and that was the thing, was that we've seen these restarts before where Lando has been in the front.
And Lando's choked.
And, no, I don't want to say choked. I think Max has just passed right away. Yeah. I think Max, one, had a better restart, and two, the Red Bull has just been stronger than the McLaren. I think
Max did have a better restart again this weekend.
But the Lando McLaren was faster, and that was what was crazy, because the second they did the restart, everyone was sitting there holding their breath. But Max could not gain on Lando. And it was amazing.
It was great to watch.
It was amazing.
And so then Lando quickly was actually out of DRS range. So he pulled away more than a second away from Max very quickly.
Which, like, again, is just unheard of. Pulling away from
Max Verstappen in a Red Bull.
At least for the last 2-3 years, it's been unheard of.
Yeah. And so at this point, Lando's just cruising in front, just gaining as much space as possible between him and Max.
I think.
And then it's Max and then Charles behind him, and the three of them kind of just cruised the rest of the time. And Oscar was actually in fourth, and Carlos was behind him, and Carlos decided that he was going to really embody the song Euphoria by Kendrick Lamar and just tell Oscar that he hates everything about him, essentially.
It was a weird moment because
it's happened for the last year. There were several times last year that Carlos and Oscar, like, it almost felt like it was intentional after a couple times that, like, Carlos was going at Oscar, and now this on top of it, it's like, what's your problem with this kid? This kid is the least problematic person on the grid.
Yeah, it just feels like really, I don't know, I would just say, if you have a moment, go and find a clip of Carlos's radio messages, because they were just, like, I don't know, one, obviously we don't know these people, but it felt like for all the radio messages we've heard, it felt like really out of character for him in a race.
Yeah, because he kept saying on his radio,
tell them to
tell McLaren to tell Oscar to give me the spot back because then he'll get a penalty if he doesn't. And so they were like, okay, and they tell McLaren, and we hear Oscar's race engineer come on, and it's like, so Ferrari just told us that they want you to give him the spot back, but we actually disagree. Don't do that. And then the stewards come back and they're like, yeah, no, he's fine. He doesn't have to give the spot back.
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt, one, really petty, and two, maybe just like...
Let the stewards do their job?
Well, and that's the thing, is that, like, the love-hate relationship we all have with the stewards is what it is, but I think that it was like, okay, let's continue to race. Like, this
well,
is racing.
and that's the thing. It ended up in not continuing to race, sort of ish, because then Carlos ended up hitting Oscar, essentially trying to pass him. Because we see Carlos try to pass Oscar, but Oscar actually had the lead going around the apex of a turn, and so then Carlos cuts in and hits Oscar and completely damages his front wing.
Yeah.
And then in the matter of, I don't know, the next lap or two, we see 3 other drivers pass Oscar.
Yeah. It was like dominoes. It sucked.
And it was so sad to watch because Oscar was having such a good race ahead of that.
Well, especially since he was, like, at one point, in the top 3.
Yeah.
Like, it just...
He was solidly in, like, P2, like, catching up to Max at one point.
Yeah.
But he ended up being called into the pit because they had to change his front wing, and then because of that, he ended up at the back of the grid and then having to just play catch-up and just try and get as far up as he could. Which, to be fair, he ended up getting up to 13th place, which is insane because I did not think that he was going to move up that quickly, but he did move pretty fast.
Well, and that's the thing. He ended up getting 13th place, and only one car DNF'd. So he ended up at the back of the grid, and then he went through all those drivers.
I think it just shows you the speed of the McLaren. I don't know what they did to the car, but
yeah,
keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to, like, see what they're gonna do next weekend or 2 weekends.
So then at some point, Lance Stroll got a 10-second time penalty. Don't really know why. I was a little confused about that one. I think he was fighting with someone, but he did get a 10-second time penalty towards the very end of the race. MC, do you know why he got that penalty?
I'm looking for it.
Well,
keep talking.
as Mary Catherine's looking, then I will tell you, if we have not, or if you did not understand our hints at it before, Lando won the race by 7.3 seconds, which is a gap that only Max Verstappen gets nowadays. So it's insane for him to have gotten that ahead of him. And I have never seen the grid. I mean, we've only been watching F1 for a year, and I've rewatched some old races, but I've never seen the grid so happy for another driver to have won. MC, do you know why Lance got that penalty now?
So, some other late action involved Albon and Stroll, with the latter going off track in his quest to come out on top and landing a 10-second time penalty as a result. So, I think it was just track limits.
Okay. But yeah, so Lando is finally a race winner. Apparently, Crofty said Lando has landed, which is a pretty good line. But I was hoping for some, what was it? Like, he won in Spa, he wins in Monza. Like, I was hoping that kind of energy.
Yeah.
Like, I was really hoping for something good. Or, like, little Lando Norris has finally done it.
So, did you say how big the gap was?
Yeah,
already?
7.2 or 3 seconds.
Because the gap was so large, I felt like Lando's last lap was, like, a little bit more,
it was a slow victory lap.
And it felt like it was, like, the cleanest lap you could do possible. It was like, don't do anything.
Well,
don't do anything.
I was holding my breath for ever since he'd gotten the lead, I was holding my breath, and I was like, nobody talk, nobody jinx anything, don't say a word. And then the last lap comes around, and I was just like, do not George Russell it.
But
do not George Russell it.
I feel like there was... So, again, as we say, like, I feel like every week we listen through F1 TV, so it's Alex Jacques who is doing the race commentary.
In DC.
And DC. And Alec just did...
a great job.
A great last lap of, like, talking about Lando and how hard he had worked. And
of, like, being like, he almost had it in Russia 2021.
Yeah, and I've never been the type of person, like, Emma can tell you, like, I've never been the type of person to, like, go to a concert and, like, cry over, like, an artist. But I have had, like, moments in my time. And listen, we didn't do rowing in college all 4 years. We had personal reasons why we left. I didn't do it for very long. But, like, there were moments in my rowing career where, like, I remember winning races and just, like, breaking down and crying because you worked so hard. And I feel like as a spectator who, yes, is relatively new to the sport, so I haven't seen Lando, like, throughout all of, like, the 6 years that he's been on the grid, I think there was just there was a beauty to the track and the support of all the other drivers to Lando. I mean, seeing Lewis Hamilton pull up in the car when they were doing the last lap and clapping, Max, all of the people that posted about it, but also ran up to him after the race and congratulated him. It was one of those moments where, we sit here and people get pissed about Max's personality or annoyed about the way other drivers act or, are frustrated that Red Bull's always on top. It's like there was such a joy in motorsport across the pundits, across, the teams that, like, everyone was happy.
Yeah. Which we will talk about more in a quick second in our final thoughts. In the post-race show, Will Buxton at one point was making fun of Laura Winter because she had cried like several times throughout the day, and I feel like that embodied almost everyone's experience for the day. Like we both said just before, I've never seen the grid so happy for a person to win.
Yeah, it felt like everyone was... Like, I think obviously there are people that were not happy with their performance. I'm sure Oscar wished he could have been higher up and within points range. I'm sure, Lewis wished he would have been higher. Like,
I'm sure Logan wished he could have finished.
Yeah, like, but I think it's this kind of moment where they're like, okay, if Lando can do it, I also think it kind of is giving a little bit of, like, hope.
It took him 5 seasons and 6 races to finally win.
But I think it's also, like, Max didn't crash. Max finished the race.
Well, that's the thing. This is the first race that, in the last year and a half, that somebody else has won that either, Max actually finished and he didn't have any car issues, or Max didn't crash out.
Yeah.
Because in Singapore, Max had car issues. In whatever race Carlos won, Australia, I think it was, Max crashed out or whatever. A bunch of these races, were won because Max couldn't compete to his level. Where now, Max was second, and someone was just faster than him that day.
Yeah, I definitely think, too, it's interesting to see because it's only, round 6?
Yeah.
And these are the upgrades. This is the speed. And so I'm also curious to see what other teams are going to bring.
I'm interested to see if Ferrari's able to catch up to McLaren, because right now, McLaren's upgrades, this is only the first round of upgrades for McLaren.
Well, and that's the thing, too. I'm curious to see if McLaren can stick to this next weekend.
I hope so.
If it wasn't just, conditions, whatever, maybe the Red Bull can perform in who knows? But I'm interested to see what
I think there were a bunch of low-speed turns in Miami, and typically McLaren sucks on those, and they're not very good in straights, and McLaren was very good this weekend. So I don't know if it was just conditions or the track or anything. I personally think that it was actually, at true
just
speed.
True, yeah.
But it was really nice seeing, Lando pull in and hearing his race engineer Will say we finally did it, we finally won, and Lando's reaction to that, and even he gets out of the car and the Red Bull engineers are clapping for him, and hit the McLaren guys that come over to his car all hug him, and then you see Charles and Max go to hug him, and then you see Fernando walk onto the track.
Yeah.
I was teary. My eyes were a little watery, and then we see Fernando walk onto the track, and that's when I lost it. I'm like, Fernando Alonso, stop. You gotta stop doing this to me. Because then Fernando afterwards went over to the McLaren guys that were waiting there and gave them all high fives and hugs. And then we see Carlos come over and say something to Lando, and then Lando just launches himself into the crowd of McLaren workers. And I mean, it was their first win in 3 years since Danny won in Italy. And a lot of people were watching the old McLaren drivers congratulate him and watching his old teammates congratulate him, watching Danny congratulate him. People were this is This is the moment that Lando's been waiting for forever. The only sad thing was that his dad wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it happens.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure the odds were probably slim to none that his parents were going to be there. But I also think it's really funny because did they enter the weekend confident? Like, did McLaren? I can't remember how they were.
I don't think they had an idea. I don't think they were like, oh, it's going to be bad. Oh, it's going to be good. I don't think they said anything, really.
Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of times when they do perform incredible,
it's because they thought they were going to do really badly.
Be so bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was funny too. There were a few clips to kind of pivot away from McLaren. There were a few clips of Lewis
clapping,
not clapping, but Lewis post race, and just kind of how he seemed like a little bit livelier.
Yeah, in an interview after the race, he was like, "This is the most fun I've had in such a long time."
I think as a spectator, it was so much fun to watch. There was so much movement on the grid constantly happening that I could not have imagined a better Grand Prix weekend.
No, not at all. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
We definitely need to watch F1 Academy so that we can actually report back to you all on that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a roundup with our Get Ready.
Yes, our Get Ready for Imola is going to be a little later than usual just because I will be out of town this weekend, so we can't record like we normally would.
It's so busy.
I apologize for that. I think everything else... Do you have anything else to comment on?
No. I'm excited for Miami 2025. I will say, I think this is shockingly one I enjoyed. Hopefully it can do the same next year.
Yeah.
Like, watch us suck next year.
I hope not.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think that's all. Make sure to follow us on all of the places. I realized the other day that we haven't been saying that at the end.
Oh.
If you haven't followed us on social media yet, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're finally starting to get back into TikTok a little bit. It's just, I thought it was going to get banned, so I didn't want to put the effort into it, to be honest. I think
thought we were going to get banned?
No, TikTok.
I was like, why would our
TikTok probably is going to get banned, but I'll make videos while I can. We just hit 700 followers on our Instagram. Which is super exciting.
Why are you, convincing them?
I gotta sell you all to follow us on our social media. And then if you don't follow us on YouTube yet, make sure to subscribe and set post alerts so that you know.
Hit that bell.
Yeah, hit the little bell. Our YouTube has been popping off a little bit recently, so make sure to follow us. And you can see our beautiful faces.
No.
Anyways, that's all for today.
Yeah, we'll see you in a few days.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.